Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Upside Swings NBA Draft Podcast, the podcast with the highest ceiling. I'm your host, Bryce Hendricks. I'm hopped up on caffeine. Had a long day of teaching, but I'm hype. We're going from a podcast that, to be honest, I really wasn't all that excited about. If we're being honest, because I didn't want to be mean, to a podcast I'm really juiced about. There's two guys in this podcast I really love, and then one guy in this podcast that I think I'm going to come across like I really love, even though I maybe actually don't. But I'm really excited. For me, this is maybe where like I've had the most change in perspective in terms of an archetype of guys. I used to not value guys who could shoot like at all, really, and I've had some changes of heart, and so I'm excited to talk about three interesting shooting wing prospects who are, honestly, if we're being honest, like across the positional spectrum. We're kind of going to go someone who I think is a shooting guard, someone who I think is a small forward, someone who I think is a power forward, but they're all shooting wings who are going to be drafted primarily for their ability to make shots. Before we get too into it and talk about some interesting guys, Coop, Stone, my friends, how you guys doing?
Tell us how you're doing.
Doing better now that I can hear you. Yeah, sorry for the technical difficulties. I'm doing well, very busy, and very ready to discuss these players.
Yeah, I had something funny to say, and then we had a 4-minute pause in the middle where Stone's technology broke. So now I forgot what I was going to say. But I'm really excited to talk about two of these guys. So let's hop right into one of the most interesting players we've talked about this cycle, Mr. Kon Kneuppel.
Absolutely. Let's talk about Mr. Kneuppel. Kon Kneuppel, that is. So Kon is a really interesting player for a variety of reasons, but we're going to start with just kind of the statistical breakdown here. So this season at Duke, he played in 39 games, more than just about anyone we've talked about or will talk about it until we get to Walter Clayton and Alex Condon, I believe, because Jojo Tugler will not be in this draft. In 30.5 minutes per game, he averaged 14.4 points, 4.0 rebounds, 2.7 assists, 1 steal, about 0.2 blocks, not very good, 1.4 turnovers on 47.9, 40.6, 91.4 shooting splits. For some more advanced stats here, Kon did only dunk twice, and he missed, according to Bart, he missed 3 dunks. According to my what I was able to see on Synergy, he only missed 2, but still not a great percentage as a dunker. But he did have only a 20.9 usage, but a 59 effective field goal rate, 64.2 true shooting, 15.7 assist rate, 12.9 turnover rate, 0.6 block percent, like I mentioned, 2.0 steal rate, 33.9 free throw rate. Shot 63.1% on close twos. Notable that there were months where that was up to 70, especially down the stretch of the season. It felt like every time he got into the lane, he finished. 40.8% on only 49 long twos. Wasn't a big long two taker, but he did shoot an okay percentage on those. 91.4% on 128 free throws, and 40.6% on 207 3-point attempts, which is 10.5 per 100 possessions. So he got him up, and he made them at a really high rate, made his free throws at a really high rate. I did think, that is fairly rare company. I did want to talk about Kon kind of as a track record of as a shooter, because he's been this level of shooter. So I'm going to go backwards in time. So this year at Duke, on jump shots, he was in the 90th percentile with a 57.3% effective field goal rate. Catch and shoot jumpers, 64.5 effective field goal rate in the 92nd percentile. And he's one of those guys where he was in a higher percentile in guarded versus unguarded. So fairly unbothered by contest, but good percentile either way. 63.5% effective field goal guarded, 65.4 unguarded. On dribble jumpers, it drops off a little bit this season, 35.3 only average. So not really a great 33rd percentile. Not a great off the dribble shooter this season at Duke, although that volume is fairly low, only 58 possessions. For his final AAU season at Phenom U, he was a similarly impactful outside shooter. On jump shots, he was in the 98th percentile of the UIBL, 61.9% effective field goal percentage. On catch and shoot shots at the AAU level, 69% effective field goal rate. The one number that's really different, one, he shot even better on guarded jump shots, 74.1%. But his dribble jumper, he was in the 96th percentile, 52.8% effective field goal percentage. And this goes back. You can look even at 16U. Now, I don't factor in what guys did as 16-year-olds much into my evaluation, but he was still 97th percentile at the dribble jumper, 88th percentile catch and shoot, 93rd percentile overall jump shots, 61.8% effective field goal rate. His track record as a shooter is long. He has been known as this level of shooter. And I think that is where we should start with his game. Now, I didn't do any BART queries on him. They're numerous and they're easy. You can search by shooters who are this level, this young, this size, whatever. Find plenty of guys. The truth is, with college shooting with guys who are shooters in college, I don't always love doing BART queries because shooting at the college level is an inherently small sample size. So there's a lot more to the shooting evaluation than just the numbers. Now, with Kon, it's different because you have the larger sample size of his AAU stuff. Also, 91.4% from the free throw line, pretty darn good indicator. But I did want to talk about just how good of a shooter he is and the type of gravity he might have. So he was just obviously a crazy efficient player in general, right? That's 64.2% true shooting. But I do think it extends beyond that to him just kind of being just an overall potential gravity well, even though he wasn't always used in that way at Duke. So, Stone, I'm going to throw this to you first. Walk us through Kon's kind of off-ball ability specifically as a shooter, but even as an overall scorer, and how that can kind of warp a defense.
Yeah, I think basically all of it stems from his processing and how he's scanning the court consistently. I think that he's always, with or without the ball, looking and making sure that he knows exactly where all other 9 players on the court are. And I think because of that, he can really demand defense to come his way and exploit that. I think when you watch him, you'll notice that he isn't always. The other thing about him too is he's really good at knowing when and when not to move. He's not consistently running around because he doesn't need to all the time. There's times where just him standing in the corner is having his man nearby and keeping another guy somewhat there as help, just because he at times can command that level of gravity of defense, and by him staying there, it's better for the ball to move on the other side of the court, and he can keep those guys somewhat in range of him. So I think that really can change the dynamic of where everybody on the court is. I really do think he is a special type of shooter, like an elite shooter, I would say. And he's really the first person in this class I would sort of give that label to. I think that he's got just amazing touch, to the likes that are unparalleled in this class so far for us, in terms of who we've seen, at least for me. And I think that really translates to him being a threat, no matter where he is on the court. That touch translates all over the court from 3. He only took 2 mid-range shots from 17 foot to 3 foot range. That's actually 200% higher than Rasheer Fleming, who we'll talk about. And to me, that's okay, because if you are where you're most efficient at is where I want you to take the most amount of shots. And he's extremely efficient from 3 and extremely efficient at the rim. And if that's not a place that he's comfortable, or that he's not as efficient in, I think that that's entirely fine, because shot diversification is great, but not if it comes at the cost of efficiency. And I think that that's something that really works in Kon's favor when it comes to getting the majority of his shots at the rim or beyond 3. And that's, typically what a lot of coaches are going to be looking for in in the NBA today. I think the other thing with the gravity that he pulls is because he can, in pick and rolls too, like he's drawing help, and sometimes there's two guys ahead of him, and he's has to pass out of a double team, or the big draws up on him, and his man stays up on him, and he's able to pass out of that because he's a fantastic connective passer, which we'll get to. But there's just a lot of different ways that I think Kneuppel can really bring two guys with him around the court at a lot of times without even having the ball in his hands. And that's just not something that we really ever see, and we haven't seen in this class so far.
I think he's a really unique combination of feel and skill. You know, I think that there's a kind of been a debate, it feels like in the last few years, of off-ball cutting versus just like plain shooting ability for spacing purposes. You know, what's more valuable? And I think Kon is kind of the perfect intersection of these two ideas, and the fact that he's such a quick processor as a playmaker while also being a good cutter. He understands space. He understands his own effects on the defense, that he's able to really just make great plays every single possession, whether, like what Stone was saying, whether he has the ball in his hands or not. And because the shot is it's so real, it's such a weapon that he just completely fundamentally changes how you have to defend everybody else on the court. Even if he's not scoring, even if he's not putting up big numbers, his understanding of space is so great. He knows his own limitations. He knows what his teammates are doing and how they need to be optimized. And I think it's just a really unique and fun combination that you don't get to see very often. You know, a guy who can score on the inside off the ball, a guy who can dribble drive a little bit, can run a little bit of pick and roll, but just kind of the perfect off-ball player in my mind.
Yeah. You know, the funniest thing about his shooting is that I think it can be even better. I think he is sometimes too willing to put the ball on the deck and try and create instead of just getting up shots. You know, he's the type of shooter where he needs to be any amount of space is too much space kind of guy. And I think that's something he'll learn. Like, I think he was really trying to play a role for Duke. If you go back and watch some of his AAU stuff, he was a little bit more like that, where any amount of space, that thing was going up. And you really had to be completely locked in on him, or he would punish you. You know, so I think he has that in him. He doesn't take the types of movement shots that someone like Liam McNeeley takes. Again, partially because Duke had other options that they weren't trying to just get him up like that. But I think he probably has that in him, though only so much, because he's really good at using screens and he's a good cutter, but he's not so fast that he can just kind of fly around and get open in that way. You know, I actually think the person he reminded me the most of when watching at times is Devin Booker. I think there's a lot of that in his game, and that does take me to when I say gravity. I think he's the type of guy who can really warp your defense, not just because he's a good shooter and you have to worry about that and you're going to have to step up, but also because he's so efficient in other ways that you have to. I think he will start to shift how defenses have to guard on a game-to-game basis, because if no matter what you do, there's something he can do to take advantage of it. You know, he got really good as a passer out of DHO and even straight up pick and roll, but DHO and Zoom stuff especially. And that's even with him not really having like a mid-range game he was hunting very much, without having like a real floater weapon he was going to. But because he was patient enough and he was strong enough that once he got that guy on his back, and he's a good enough ball handler. Like he doesn't have like a deep bag of moves. He's not hitting like double tween crosses to create a ton of space or anything. But once he has that advantage, which he will get with his shooting and with off-ball screens, he's really, really good at, you know, if you're going to do a half-hearted little dig on his handle, he'll slow down, keep that guy on his back, and then if you don't commit all the way, he'll go downhill again. He's a good enough finisher when, in terms of playing the space in a 2-on-1, that he was really, really effective at that. You know, Malawach got quite a few easy lobs just because if you committed to taking Malawatch away and you sat back, Kon was good enough to finish going either way with either hand, even through his own guy, if his own guy did somehow get back in front. And if you stepped up even a little bit, he was putting that up, and he has really good touch on his lob passes. There's work to be done to, be a more holistic passer. He wasn't throwing a ton of skips. He wasn't throwing a ton of even advantage kickouts at all. Really weren't really his thing. His focus once he gets going downhill is the rim, and he wants to get past that second level of defense and finish, or get past that second level of defense and throw a lob. That's really what he wants to do. But he's really, really good at that. And I think there's even some stuff with his game as in terms of, if you're going to switch everything, I think he showed he can just beat smaller guys. Like, if you put smaller guys on him, he will get to little jump shots, they're not counted as jump shots by Bartorvik or by Synergy, but he'll use his shoulders to create just a little angle right at the rim, right? For he loves that little bump, fade, bank shot. All that stuff is great if you put smaller guys on him. And bigger guys, he's not crazy quick, and he doesn't have like a top gear really. But what he does have is that he's such a weapon with his jumper, and he's strong enough that he only needs half a step on these guys, and he will bump bigger guys out of the way consistently to get lanes as a driver. So I think overall, like, he's going to start to really shift how defenses guard. And that's, sort of the first thing you want to see, right? Is, okay, he's going to shift how defenses guard, especially, away from the ball, but then, getting onto the ball. Let's talk a little bit, if you guys see very much on-ball scoring upside. Obviously, I started to blend off-ball and on-ball there at the end, but Coop, I'll throw this back to you. Do you think he's the type of guy who has some upside to be like a all-around scorer, or is he more of kind of a shooter, cutter, secondary attacker at the NBA level?
I do think that there's some potential there. I don't think it's fully developed at the moment, but like, he developed really great pick and roll chemistry with Malawatch, going down the stretch of that Duke season, like you talked about, Bryce. And it was the kind of stuff that, like, maybe you don't want to be running this all the time because he's not making advanced reads. But to your point about Devin Booker comes in and gets some extra developmental reps at the point guard, early in his career, and, gets force-fed into these situations developmentally and becomes the superstar he is now, instead of just the star scorer that he used to be. I do think that something similar could be in the books here for Kneuppel. I also, I don't, it would have to take, Devin Booker's a very specific player. This is not all to be like, he is the next Devin Booker, and he required a very specific developmental situation. I don't think that it's something that you're like drafting him to 100% do, and that you're really buying into, unless you're like a Washington and you really just need another bet at that, other than Bub Carrington. As much as Bub has been really fun, you need bets other than just that guy at the point guard. And he's a guy who you could, take early, develop into that long term, but he's not an advanced enough passer with anything other than just basic hit the big man read stuff to where I'm really comfortable making that kind of bet. I'm also not sure the handle is fully advanced in like a super real way. He's really good at using his handle and knowing his own limitations and getting to his spots, despite the fact that he's not like a crazy ball handler or whatever. There's nothing wrong with that, but he's not the kind of guy who I'm drafting and being like, oh, this is our primary bet. Stone, do you agree or do you disagree with me here?
Yeah, I would not have Kneuppel. I would not be drafting him thinking he's going to be a long-term primary bet. I would most definitely think he's, in the higher end outcomes, like a really solid secondary or tertiary guy on your hopefully championship type team. And I think that is what you're drafting him for. And I think I think that's still it, for even though that is not as attractive maybe to a lot of people as being the number one option for a really good team. I think that it can still yield a lot of value, and be something that really, um, even in that role, is can be as valuable as like a lesser number one for a team that's not going very far. So um, I think the reason he can get to that level is because I think personally he's like maybe the best connective passer I've ever seen, since evaluating at least. And I think that a lot of that is because we touched on this last year too with Jalen Tyson, where I think if you are really processing things and scanning the court before you get the ball, you have so much of an advantage as to where you're going next with the ball, than if you start your processing timeline once you get the ball passed to you. And I think Kneuppel does a really good job of that in knowing exactly where everybody is, how they're moving, and then he does a really good job of once he gets the ball, he has a general idea of what's going to happen and where everybody is, but he just does a quick reassess. And I think that just yields such efficient passing. I don't think really any. I mean, I'm sure there are some, but majority of his turnovers are not coming off of bad passes. I feel like it's coming off of getting picked off of because the handle isn't great, or because guys just maybe aren't catching the passes. But I think he's an extremely efficient passer. He's not the most complex in terms of making like one-handed skip passes or anything, but he makes a lot of two-handed ones. I think that he's someone that he draws a lot of gravity with his touch. Even once he gets past the main defender, I think guys start even to suck in on him in the mid range, even though he only took like I think two or three in the entire season. And when they do that, he just immediately knows where the ball's going and where to find that open man. Um, all of his passes seem extremely accurate. Like they're right to the shooter's pocket, to the chest of the guy that's going up for the dunker spot, whatever the case may be. But he's very efficient and accurate with his passes, and I think when you're a secondary guy or a tertiary guy doing that, that's a lot of value right there. And the other aspect of it that we already talked about is just knowing where to be on the court and the gravity that he pulls as a shooter. And you combine those two things, and as we'll get to with the finishing, like that's pretty much the complete offensive package when you're talking about a guy that's not your primary option, like anything but the primary option. And I think he does all of those things at an elite level. Like he's an elite connective passer, an elite processor, and an elite shooter. And I think when all those things are at that level, it typically is going to yield very, very high results for the value proposition.
Yeah, first thing here, I want to shout out Chuck from Chucking Darts. During the cycle, I don't listen to other draft podcasts, at least not before I talk to guys. So, or talk about guys, excuse me. So, Chuck, I haven't listened to a lot of your draft pods recently, but we love you, and he has brought up in the past the idea that we sometimes talk about floor and ceiling as things that are on the opposite spectrum. I think Kon is a perfect example of why that's not true to me. I think Kon is a really, really high offensive ceiling, and that includes superstar outcomes like a Devin Booker is an obvious comparison. Even like it would look very different, but like even like the James Harden level, even like MVP type outcomes, I think are in the cards for him. And I know that's going to sound crazy, so I'm going to go on a little bit of a rant here before you guys can step in here. The first thing I want to talk about is Kon has a supercomputer brain in terms of his ability to process and the speed at which he is seeing things. He has the right mix of proactive passing and reactivity as a passer and handler. He is predetermining in that he is trying to make certain reads happen, but he is not predetermining in terms of in terms of forcing something. It's the right type of proactivity where he has a 2-on-1. He's thinking, okay, I want to throw this lob. What can I do to open up that lob? Okay, I'm going to hit this little head fake in the lane, but the big doesn't step up. I'm just going to finish. I think he was somewhat muted by the context of playing with Cooper Flagg, playing with Tyrese Proctor and Sion James, who all required a lot of usage. But you saw when Coop went out that he really stepped up as kind of a go-to guy, as a driver, as a scorer, and as a playmaker. I think those are all in his game, and he has that. And if he wasn't playing on a team that was more or less built around Coop, and by extension, like this team was kind of built around Tyrese Proctor too, if we're being honest. And I think that's a big reason why it fell apart for him in the end. But I think Kon is so smart that there is pathways that are hard to see when you just write his skill set down, because he has an ability to process in a different way than many other players. He is also the level of shooter, I think, that approaches the star in and of itself just on that skill. He is, to me, I talked about Trey Johnson, how much I like Trey Johnson as a shooter, and how I thought there was a world that Trey Johnson is the best shooter I've ever evaluated. I think Kon is the best shooter I've ever evaluated. No holds barred. I think he is the best shooter I've ever evaluated. Both because he's just, every time he's open, it feels like he's going in, or it feels like it's going in. He's pretty unbothered by contest. It's super quick. He can change his release as needed, but he doesn't do it unnecessarily. All that stuff, right? I think all that stuff is great. He also just has a real knack for getting open, but he is also the best shooter I've evaluated because he has great touch and great ability to create for it. His worst shots right now are wide open off the dribble shots. I'm sorry, if there's one thing, if there's one thing that I think can improve, it's his ability to hit wide open off the dribble shots. If teams are really going to try and beat him by going under, I think that's a bad strategy long term. He almost just, I think he struggled with it this year some because he was like, well, these aren't the shots I'm supposed to take, but this is obviously the correct shot to take right now. I just think his combination of shooting, his efficiency, again, he's not a great handler in terms of the moves he's going to hit, but I think he is I think he has some pathways to like Kawhi style handle development because he already has good pace and patience as a handler. He has the strength to where he doesn't ever get bumped off his lines once he gets going, and he's really good right now playing out a triple threat in similar to like Jimmy Butler or whatever, right? Where he does, even though he doesn't have a quick first step necessarily, he creates good advantages out of triple threat because he just reads the guy's body well. He can go both ways. He's pretty ambidextrous as a finisher, as a handler. His biggest, I think one of the bigger holes is his passing vocabulary. I think part of the reason he doesn't throw a lot of those types of passes is because he doesn't have the vocabulary to access those, right? He's a really good passer, but he's not. He doesn't have the bag as a passer to create some of those looks, and he also just wasn't trying to. Again, that wasn't his role this year. But we've seen guys who are this smart have pretty rapid passing improvements. Again, a Devin Booker, I think, is a great example, and I think he has that in him. And so all that's to say, all that is not to say that I think he will be an MVP guy or anything like that. But I think those outcomes are in his game, like in there. I think there is a world where, because he is so good and he's going to play early, and he's also happens to be so smart and so talented on the truth is the right side of the floor, right? Like offense is what is often going to get guys on the floor early in their career, and it's what's going to get them creation reps. I think in the right development system, there's a real ceiling there that is worth an upside swing. Let's put it that way. I just think that he sometimes gets talked about as, oh man, he's going to be so great as someone who's going to stand there and make shots and can hit shots off movement and is going to be a good connective passer. And while I think that's all true, he's going to be a good shooter and he's going to be a good connective passer. And we'll talk about the defense in a little bit, but I don't think it's horrendous. I think people are overlooking the fact that guys this young, I didn't mention his age, and this is my fault. He is a August 3rd, 2005 birthday. He will turn 20 before the start of his rookie season. So he's not like crazy young, but he's still pretty young, right? Guys this young with this level of feel, obvious skill, and pathways to advantage creation don't come around that often. And he's a real wing. So it's not the traditional star bet that we often see, but I think there's star equity here. So Coopstone, obviously, I'm the highest on Kon. I might be the highest on Kon, on all of draft evaluation Twitter. I don't know. You guys tell me where I might be wrong here, or what you hear that might be different, or hey, I see what you're saying, but whatever. What's the pushback here?
I think for me, I struggle to see those sort of outcomes. And like you're saying, maybe those are the top 1 or 2 or 5% outcomes that are very unlikely that exist. I guess honestly, maybe I haven't allowed myself to think about those outcomes being a possibility. And maybe I on my end, I need to stew about that more. You got my gears turning a little bit. Maybe
For what it's worth, I wouldn't say they're just like a top 1 percentile.
Okay. Yeah, in that case, you're probably higher than I am. But I maybe I just haven't allowed myself to think about Kon in that way, to consider the fact that he could get to that level. But I definitely think the most likely outcomes are very positive and productive and lead to winning basketball. In star roles as secondary and tertiary guys, like you look at guys, and not to say that they're similar players or anything, but just in the level of value they hold in that role, like a Jalen Williams on the Thunder, like that's a very valuable player that's not necessarily a number 1 superstar on his team, but has like very much star value because of other things that he provides. And I think that, Kon can get to that level of value. I haven't thought about it, so I guess maybe I just need more time to really consider the fact that he can get to that level of stardom that you're speaking of. But at the moment, even without that, like I think that the value is extremely high for him. So I don't know necessarily if I'd push back at this point in time. This might be something I come back to you and push back to you on a text chat or something, because I guess need more time to process and consider the fact that possibility might exist.
I don't know about MVP level outcomes, and maybe this is a lot of different kinds of biases. But to me, a lot of Kon's highest end outcomes look like a guy like Tyrese Halliburton, who is just so elite at the elite skills that are so elite at the skills that matter the most in the game, that he just completely shifts how a defense plays. And he's good enough he knows himself well enough to just completely dominate and be a 1A on a good team.
I see what you're saying, and I think that's realistic too. But again, in terms of ceiling, Kon has better physical tools than a Halliburton, and I think by nature of him not being a point guard, I think that's playing into this too. Where I mentioned even like a James Harden, but I think maybe the real kind of MVP comparisons are, like a Kawhi, or even like a Steph. Obviously, Steph is put in a point guard roles, but where they're hybrid on ball, off ball, to where half their value comes from them being just elite off ball shooters and movers, and some of what they do defensively. Obviously, Kon is not the level of defender Kawhi is, and I'm not comparing him to Kawhi in terms of like who he is. Obviously, if I really thought Kawhi was a realistic outcome, he'd be number 1, even above Cooper Flag. and he's not. I'm not trying to get that far ahead of myself. But what I'm saying is I do think it's a worthwhile discussion to have, that there are outcomes for him that I think are much more achievable than they are for others that are very, very outlier, where I think he can be a real top end star in the NBA because he's just so smart. He's physically gifted in kind of a weird way, and he's such a good shooter. And he is also really good at, again, the gravity of his shooting is so real, and he's already developed, and there's still some ground to be gained here at using that gravity to create good shots for himself and others, even if it doesn't always look the kind of traditional way we often see it look. That's more my argument for, hey, there is a path to like a top 7-8 player in the league. It's the Jason Tatum, it's the, that type of like hey, young star shot making wing who is good at using that gravity, developing as a creator for others. Now, he's not as young as a Tatum was, and he's worse prospects than those guys, because first and most importantly, because he's a far worse athlete. And we're going to talk about the athleticism concerns in a minute. But I did want to frame that I do see that, like I do see a world where he can be that guy. So that's my soapbox. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I think you actually gave me another thing. It's that, like, Halliburton is not a traditional star. He's not a comparable star. And I don't mean to like sit here and be like, oh, he's going to be a star in the way Halliburton is. Halliburton is like he's just so unique that he ends up providing star level value. And I do think that Kon's combination of high-end processing, super high feel for the game, elite shot making at multiple levels, and I do think the motor is pretty good, and just like quick recognition. I think all of that comes together to make a star level player in a lot of different ways, whichever way the team that drafts him chooses to develop him. I think there's a lot of options there for him to provide value.
I don't want to, and if you guys are ready to jump to like the athletic aspect of it, but somewhat staying in this conversation too is have we seen a player with Kon's athletic makeup actually reach that level of stardom before? Not to say the draft in basketball are all about first, like, not to say first can't happen or that there is, but off the top of my head, and not to say, I want to preface this also.
There's two guys who come to mind here.
Okay, go ahead.
Steph Curry and Steve Nash. Now, Steph Curry and Steve Nash had a different level of quickness, but I think Kon covers that in terms of his strength. I do think when it comes to athletic traits, I do think it's important to talk about Kon's strength is an elite athletic trait. He is an elite strength profile for, like, he's probably only like 6'5", if we're being honest. He's listed at 6'7". There is no way. He might even be 6'4" without shoes. I'm not sure. But I'd say he's 2 guard sized. But the strength profile is elite in the at the level of guys like Jimmy Butler and Kawhi Leonard and Luka, right? Like that, he's that level of strength-based athlete. And he also has really good decel and acceleration out of that decel. Even though he doesn't have the top end speed, he does have the stupid. He does have the ability to, for those that can't read the chat, Coop just said that's fat in Luka's case. So he's not claiming his strength is a product of work. We will debate that later. I mean, Kon is a sturdy guy, and he also has really good deceleration. And even though he doesn't reach top end acceleration of like a De'Aaron Fox or a Steph Curry or a Steve Nash, he does explode out of that deceleration pretty suddenly. Like he can change gears really quickly. So even though he's not getting to that top end, if he's hitting you when you're least expecting it, and then if he even has half a step, he's going to bump you off his line and he's going to get where he wants to go. I do think that is like close. I kind of think like, you're with what you're saying, like physically he's close to a Luka, and Luka hasn't won an MVP yet, but he's in that range. And I don't think he's far off in terms of overall athletic profile from those MVP guards. Now, again, I'm not trying to say he is an MVP or will be an MVP, but I do think that I think there's a real chance that he is the guy we're looking back on as the Shai Gilgeous-Alexander of this draft. What the fuck were we thinking letting him drop to 10? That's what I'm trying to get at. Not so much that he will be that level of guy, just I think there's a real chance that he's that level of the guy. And for me, when you combine that with the fact that at worst, he's like a really good bench shooter who is going to be a great connector, and you're probably going to want on the floor in big moments, at least during the regular season. That's a home run top 2 guy for me. And that's a top 5 guy in most drafts. Like in every draft. In every draft, there's a top 5 guy for me. In most drafts, he's probably a top 2 or 3 guy. Like, I don't know that he's a meaningfully worse prospect than like Scoot Henderson was. I liked Scoot Henderson a lot. I was really high on Scoot. I think Kon is about that level of prospect. And I know that I'm completely out on a limb there. I understand that. But that's where I'm at with him. I'm really legitimately that high on him. And honestly, the more I talk about it, the higher on him I get. The more I believe that there's just so much here with Kneuppel, and he's the type of guy I'm willing to be wrong on too.
Yeah, I mean, I like Kneuppel not that much, but I do like him quite a bit. I mean, I guess before we get to like where we have them, I feel like this has taken a turn in how I thought this conversation was going to go, where we're just talking all about outcomes, and that's actually more fun in my opinion. But I think that defensively, he is really strong, and I think he's built to guard a lot of guards. Like, I don't think laterally he's atrocious. I think his hips flip extremely quickly. I think he's really strong. I think, and now it's time for me, I guess, to sound a bit crazy. But this is crazy that we're talking about Kon Kneuppel in this way, and people are going to think we're actually insane. Hopefully, we're conveying it in a way that makes sense to people, though. He is extremely strong, and he's not like super technically proficient in the way that these guys were, but like, is there a chance he can guard up quite a bit because of his strength in a way that like Drew Holiday and Marcus Smart did / can, like, just because he's so strong that maybe he is a guy that he's not 6'7", but maybe he's guarding guys that are 6'8", 6'9", because he's so strong, and able to take that sort of impact, and laterally isn't terrible. His hips flip really quickly. He doesn't have the level of hands I think either of those guys have. That's probably a big differentiator there. But in terms of maybe he's a lot more defensively versatile than we think, or that most people think.
I think there's a world where you can throw him on guys like that and he can survive. I don't know if he's going to be like stopping big 6'7", 6'8", or even like 6'6" guys who are strong consistently. He's really strong, especially as a driver. I don't know how great he is at combining his lateral movement with his ability to like stop a guy. Like, he's not stonewalling guys on drives all the time, right? I think he's really good at containing, and he has really great verticality, but that is not like the guys you talked about kind of defense, right? I understand where you're coming from, where it's like he's not doing that exact thing. It's just the concept of, oh, he's 6'4" guarding guys who are 6'7". But I think that it's really valuable that you can get a wing who can guard some bigger ones, even to some smaller fours. And it's like not an exaggeration of his abilities. I think he's got pretty good lateral footwork. I think he's strong enough to stick with strength-based creators, which is honestly one of the the really hard types of players to guard. A lot of the toughest players to guard in the league right now are the Tatums, the Cades, these strength, the Lucas, these stronger wing-sized guys. And I think he can at least put up a fight. And that makes him a lot more valuable as a wing defender, especially because the off-ball defense is really good. I think his positioning is great.
I think, yeah, that's an important distinction that I guess I want to clarify with people. Is I don't think he's going to be a Drew or Marcus Smart type defender because not only does he not have the hands of those guys, he's not the havoc created that those guys were, but just in the sense of
they're both longer too, I bet.
Oh yeah, for sure. But is he strong enough to be a multi-positional guy that guards up and down lineups that I think, like Cooper said, does hold value against a lot of star guys, but also he's not like a lockdown guy in the way that those guys were. He's not completely locking you up, but he's a guy that can maybe survive. And if he can survive against 4 out of the 5 guys on the court, I think that holds a lot of value. Versatility typically just holds value.
Yeah, I think in isolation he's going to be a perfectly fine, maybe even good isolation defender on a lot of guys. If your goal is, hey, let me get Kon on an island, I don't think you're going to be in a great spot. No, he's not going to be I don't think the best stopper in the league or anything, but he's strong enough. He's going to absorb contact. You won't go through him. He kind of has to take risks as an on-ball defender where he is trying to cut off a drive, and if he predicts wrong, he's going to get pretty dusted. But if he predicts right, and he does predict right more than he predicts wrong, you're going to get completely chested up and you're not going to go anywhere. So I actually think on the ball, he's perfectly fine. The screen nav is pretty rough. He'll have moments, especially off ball, where he'll get through screens pretty well by just kind of hitting the screen hard on purpose and kind of just, getting through an action like that. But when he's really trying to navigate, especially guys who are good pull-up shooters, he struggles with. He's also just not a great contest guy. He's the type of guy where it's oh man, you wonder if he can guard a Jalen Brunson pretty well, but he's probably not going to contest Jalen Brunson jumpers super well. So I think he's going to be fine guarding, some ones, most 2s, 3s, and 4s in the league, and even some 5s in terms of isolation stuff. But I don't think he's going to be a plus in terms of locking guys down, getting through screens. I think he's going to contribute to a switching scheme perfectly fine. My biggest issue with his defense is his off-ball stuff. He makes reads and he does all that stuff fine, and when he can be in the right place, he's effective. But the ground coverage is just really bad. He can't cover ground. He's a good closeout guy when he sees where the closeout is going to be, but he's not a good closeout guy in terms of closing out, pushing to cut off a drive, and then as they pass, sprinting into help. He just doesn't cover ground like that, and he doesn't change direction crazy quickly. So I agree with you guys in general. I think he is there's a world where he's a real 3-and-D guy. There is a world where he's just kind of survivable, but I don't think there's a world where he's just completely awful defensively. So I'll go last here, but you guys tell me, where are you at in terms of ranking Kon, where you would draft him in this class with the guys we've seen so far, where you would draft him in most classes, all that kind of stuff. Where are you guys at?
Yeah, I think because I just don't think he has the handle of a lot of the great strength-based creators that we talked about. And obviously he lacks the elite acceleration of a lot of primary guys. I don't think I feel comfortable in thinking those outcomes really are achievable for him. I guess at least in the way that Bryce does, that I think it can really be a star number 1 option for a team. I struggle to really see that. But again, the value is there without that. I have him currently 3rd on my board because I like Dylan Harper a lot more than you guys, but I am open to the idea of moving him above Harper and I'll probably have him in the same tier as Harper. So he's a top 3 in this class for sure for me.
I really want to bust your balls about Dylan Harper right now, but now it's not the time to be doing that. Star outcomes in the NBA are predicated on special skills. I've talked about that. I've not shut the fuck up about that this cycle. I'm not gonna lie, but I think Kon is kind of the ultimate kind of hidden in plain sight. I mean, just look at this guy. He's got 2 or 3 special skills. A lot of good skills, a lot of stuff that he does well on a basketball floor. I think the fact that, to me, his lowest and worst end outcomes are just guy who comes in and hits shots and can also make the right play and be okay on defense. That is so goddamn valuable. That is such a valuable player. And he's going to get the reps to continue
worst,
to develop.
I still think he's a starter, to be honest. Like, even though I said 6-man, like at worst, like winning teams, I think are still going to want this guy. I mean, Pat Connaughton has started playoff games. Like, he's just a better. What if Pat Connaughton was good? Actually, is like the whole thing with Kon Kneuppel. So, like, I think at worst he's a starter.
Yeah, and that's an insane value proposition to me, especially when you take into account the higher end outcomes. I think he requires a little bit of creativity. I think when he gets in the gym with an NBA team, they're just going to see a guy who comes in, works his ass off, tries really hard, and is really, really skilled and fits with any kind of player. I think that's another really underrated thing. He can play with any other kind of star and play a role. With any kind of lineup, he can play a role. With any kind of defense, because of the ability defensively to talk, we talked about to guard some 1s and like basic most 2s and 3s and some 4s. He has so much flexibility, and he's actually like good at this stuff. There's so much talk about versatility, and versatility is just guy who can kind of do a lot of things. Kon Kneuppel is a guy who can do a lot of things really well. I don't have him at 2. I won't steal Bryce's thunder there. But I do have him at 3 behind Derek Queen in the same tier. I think the special is really special, and I really hope the Rockets draft him if they keep their pick this year.
So your Queen is just my Harper, basically.
Except Queen's actually good and played on a winning team. Okay, shut the fuck up.
And my Kneuppel is your Queen and your Harper. So yeah, I'm gonna have Kon too. I'm gonna have him in a tier of his own at 2. I'm fully willing to admit that this is me being out on a limb. His stat profile doesn't necessarily look like a guy who should go this high. You watch his game, he doesn't look like a guy who should go this high. This is me trying to learn from the guy. Who are the guys that we look back on draft after draft and say, man, they should have went higher. Man, they should have went higher. It's these guys who are really smart, really good passers, who, maybe there's one thing in their game that's kind of a big question. Stone mentioned with Jalen Williams. Okay, with him, it was how good of a shooter is he? Is he going to be a good enough shooter? Devin Booker came off the bench for that team. There's other examples I should be thinking of that I'm blanking on. A lot of them have a couple things in common. I mentioned the passing. A lot of them have strength in common. Like, strength is a real underrated skill in the NBA. Underrated athletic trait. Your strength. Part of why Jalen Williams is so effective is because he's strong as fuck, and you can't move him. If he gets on his line, he is on his line. It's a really, really under-discussed skill trait or athletic trait. Kon has that. Kon is crazy smart, and he's a really good shooter with a floor as someone who is going to get minutes early in his career no matter where he is playing. There is no chance that Kon Kneuppel is on a team and not playing any minutes next year. I love Reed Sheppard. Reed Sheppard found himself on a team where he is not playing minutes. That is not going to happen with Kon. I guarantee it. He will play minutes next year. And that is so important for his developmental pathways.
Can I ask why the player that you just described, like in that way, why he's not in the same tier as a Cooper Flag?
I think the big difference is Cooper Flag has such an athletic advantage. I think Flag is a more developed handler, and the truth is, I think Flag has a longer track record of like true domination, like getting his shit off against high level competition and dominating. I think Kon is a bit more of a question as how much can he dominate, right? But now at the UIBL level, Kon was a cold dude. I mean, listen, he was getting his stuff. So I don't want to say that there's no track record of that level of domination, that level of upside. I think if you go back and watch his UIBL stuff, you're like, damn, this is a guy. This is a guy who could be a real star. But I do think that Coop was it's just at a slightly different level. I've definitely been giving the high sell on Kon because I kind of knew you guys were maybe a little bit lower than me, and I wanted to start there. There's things that do legitimately worry me, and that I think are potential limiters to that ceiling. The burst, the lack of vertical explosion. I think first and foremost, how he's going to be able to finish with rotating shot blockers who can get to his stuff late. I think is a big worry. The ACC itself wasn't great. And then just how good of a shooter can he be when he's being guarded, like face guarded all the time, right? Can he still be the guy who's going to get those shots off? Can he run around and constantly knock down tough contested looks? I'm not fully sold on that. So there's still some stuff there, but in terms of the why, it's just that the biggest thing is I just think Coop has more of a ability to dominate, specifically defensively. Like I think Coop maybe even has a higher floor than Kon because Coop is no matter what going to be a great preternatural defensive player in a way Kon just isn't and can't be. So those are the main reasons why.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't mean to put you on the spot either. I just
no, you're good. No, I appreciate that question, and I appreciate any challenges to my board, and especially again, I know I'm out on a limb here with Kon the same way I was out on a limb a little bit with Jonas, but there's just something about him, I guess.
I do think both those Duke guys, for what it's worth, like have the same level of motor. Like I think Kneuppel's motor is like on par with Cooper Flag's. Like it's that level.
I disagree. I think Flag's motor is really special. I really like Kon's. I think Kon's is really good, but maybe also part of that is because Kon's movement abilities defensively, like outside of just straight guarding, are not as good.
Flag's motor, I think, just leads to more production because it's combined with his athletic tools. But I think, like, for me specifically, I think that
I do think that's fair because I something I didn't talk about with Kon. He's great at just bullshit plays, right? Where things break down and he just does some random bullshit by trying hard and getting the ball in the right spot, right? And that is a really good sign of a high motor. So maybe it does just show itself in different ways, but I still lean a little bit towards Flag.
As like a special, like there's a world that Flag has like a Garnett level motor, which is like top like 10 all-time motor. You know what I mean? Like that's not an unrealistic world. Let's transition here. Are you guys are done on Kneuppel?
Yeah, he's good. Yeah, Kon's a really good basketball player. That's the TL team didn't listen.
Kon Kneuppel, good at basketball.
You are so muted right now, buddy. Dude, what the fuck happened? He was talking 5 seconds ago.
Bro broke it.
God damn.
We just gotta stay quiet till he's back so it's easier to edit out. But
no, because I like adding the sections of bullshit to the end. That's my favorite part.
I'm just gonna soy jack anytime like one of you guys said something I disagree with. I'm gonna soy face.
Where the fuck is he?
Don't die. He's gone.
Yeah.
This is gonna be really easy for me to find in the audio edit because it's like right at the beginning. But
Yeah.
Poopstone, how you doing?
Oh my god.
This guy.
Oh, dude.
But my mic is not turning on when I plug it in. It's just like off.
Oh my god. Maybe he's gonna have to sound. That's what he gets for making fun of your potato computer.
my cheap work computer.
Stone? Stone?
Yo, can you hear me?
Okay, yeah.
You guys just froze for a minute.
You just froze for a minute.
How, are you guys there? You can hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. My bad. I don't know what's happening, but everything stopped working at once. All right.